Part 2, Meeting with Bai Xuelan. During the whole Spring Festival, except for the unsavory reunion dinner on New Year's Eve, the rest was lackluster. There are dozens of people who usually rent in the hall. Some go home for the New Year, and those who do not go home also invite 3 or 5 friends to go out to lively. And they become more and more deserted. This is cheaper for Xuan Huaifeng. He always liked to be quiet, so when he returned to the guild hall, he picked out a few thick foreign novels in the bookcase and read them comfortably on the bed. The guild hall pays for meals on a per capita basis. Although the food is not exquisite, the guy can still greet him and figure out Xuan Huaifeng's temperament. When the meal is ready, he will not call him out to eat outside the window. The hot meal and the hot dishes were brought in, and he was allowed to eat quietly in the room. For several days in a row, even Xuan Huaifeng was so diligent that he felt embarrassed. Although he was shy, he still took 50 cents from the envelope and handed it to the man. It was a red envelope for the new year. Before you know it, a spring break has passed. Xuan Huaifeng still went to school to teach. At the beginning of March, when Xuan Huaifeng came back from class this day, as soon as Xuan Huaifeng entered the door, the clerk in the guild hall saw him sharply and ran over. "Mr. Looking for you. I was about to hang up, and I saw you entering the door as soon as I turned around." Xuan Huaifeng thanked him and went to the telephone room to pick up the phone. It turned out that his sister wanted him to go to the reception tonight. "Huaifeng, you are not allowed to come here. Your brother-in-law and I have been preparing for the reception tonight. If you are disobedient, don't call me a sister in the future." The reason for attending the meeting was finalized. "Come here before 7 o'clock in the evening. Remember to put on the new clothes I made for you, and dress up nicely." Speaking of which, Xuan Huaifeng's excuses were useless. After hanging up the phone and lingering in the room until 6 o'clock, it was estimated that it would take almost an hour to arrive all the way. "Before I put on my new Spring Festival suit and went out." It was just 7 o'clock when it arrived at the New Year's house. The sun had fallen below the field of vision, and in the far horizon, only a faint gray cloud remained. Xuan Huaifeng glanced at it from a distance. Nian's house was brightly lit under the twilight, like a woman who spent all her time dressing up, waiting for her lover to arrive. Presumably all the lights that could be turned on were on. There were several brightly painted cars parked outside the gate, some with small government flags in front of them, and the blue and white flags swayed occasionally in the evening wind. Xuan Huaifeng arrived at the gate. The concierge of Nian's house recognized him, called out, "Master Huaifeng," opened the door, and asked him to go in to find Mrs. Nian on his own. It was said that the reception started at 7 o'clock. In fact, guests had already come here. Nian's house seemed to be a small open park. From the gate to the corridor, there were people standing everywhere in 2s and 3s. Most of the men wore suits, and the women dressed they were different. Some were wearing Western-style dresses, some were wearing cheongsams, and they were chatting and laughing freely while holding wine. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng passing by, he couldn't help but glance at his handsome and slender back. Xuan Huaifeng almost didn't know the people here, and he didn't like to chat with people. He casually stopped a maid who was holding a wine plate and asked, "Where is the madam?" The maid smiled at him, chin up. He waved in the direction of the living room. "It's inside." "I'm afraid I won't be able to get out of here." Xuan Huaifeng walked towards the living room. "Before entering the door, I heard the sound of clattering, and when I went in, it was so lively that it was already full of people. The original set of 8 immortals table and chairs in the living room has long since disappeared. The place against the wall is now an oversized long table, which is covered with burgundy imported flannel, and various desserts are served in crystal-clear glass dishes. There are 6 or 7 mahjong tables, occupying almost all the rest of the living room. There are many people around each table watching the battle. The people who speak must also raise their throats, and everyone's ears are buzzing. Huaifeng. Here, Xuan Dian was playing mahjong, touching cards with one hand and raising her hand twice in the air at Xuan Huaifeng. Only then did Xuan Huaifeng see his sister from one of the mahjong tables, leaned sideways in the crowd, and walked over slowly. "Why did you arrive at this time?" Xuan Dian asked him casually while staring intently at the cards on the poker table. "Isn't it 7 o'clock? I'm not too late. I told you to arrive early. But it's nothing. The people who are rushing to the early show are a few acquaintances. And the important people haven't arrived yet. Today, the director has several offices. The elders are coming over." Xuan Dian typed out an 80,000 yuan and told him, "Wait a minute when they arrive. Don't be restrained. Go up and say hello to them. Just talk and laugh." Before she finished speaking, Xuan Dian's opponent suddenly giggled and flipped the cards. "Huh." Everyone shuffled the cards again. Xuan Dian took out her small wallet, gave the lost money to her opponent, stood up and said, "I forgot to tell Zhang Mama about something. You play 2 games for me first." Xuan Huaifeng waved his hand. "I don't like gambling." Xuan Dian stammered, "It's only $1 a chip. What kind of gambling is it? If you lose, my sister will give it." She pulled Xuan Huaifeng and pressed it on the chair. "Sister, I don't know." "Then, learn. You don't even know mahjong. How will you get along with your colleagues and bosses in the future?" Red and black, pushing away several guests, blocking his way with both hands along the way. "You're still playing mahjong." He came to Xuan Dian and stomped his feet desperately. Quickly withdraw. Quickly withdraw from the table." He turned to the people at the mahjong table who were staring at him, his hands out. He fainted and pushed in mid-air. "No more, no more." Xuan Dian asked strangely, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" "It's a big deal." Nian Liangfu immediately turned his head back. Chief Pai's deputy just called and said that Chief Pai would be here tonight. Xuan Dian still didn't understand. "What is Chief Pai? Isn't the commander, Chief Liao?" "I don't have the time to tell you now." Nian Liangfu's brow lit up anxiously, and he rubbed his hands around in circles. "Hurry up and ask the servants to remove the table. Chief Pai is a big Buddha who can't be invited. This time, the Pai hit us on the head. He has just returned from studying abroad. And he is a young talent. I heard people say that he doesn't like government officials to play mahjong and sing opera." With a sudden pause, he raised his voice and shouted at the footman outside the window. With a loud voice, "Young Gui, make a phone call to retire the troop prepared for tonight. Tell them not to come." Turning around, he saw a group of guests who were addicted to playing mahjong stunned, and everyone's eyes were watching. He immediately shouted, "Remove the table." Everyone seemed to have recovered, stood up, turned around, and a few little maids and servants hurried up to move the table. A footman went over to ask for instructions. "Sir, I borrowed 2 mahjong tables from Mr. Zhang's house next door. Should I return them now?" "What else? Throw them away. Don't keep them. Throw away the mahjongs." Dai Yun frowned. "What are you doing? Stop talking nonsense, anyway. I can't let Chief Pai see that there is a mahjong table in my house. Hurry up. Hurry up. Didn't you eat?" "Dilly." Xuan Huaifeng stood aside. Nian Liangfu didn't even glance at him at the end of his eyes, just urging everyone to clean up the living room, gesticulating and shouting loudly. "Sir," Nianggi suddenly ran in from the door. "There are a lot of cars coming, and a bunch of noble people are coming. It seems that Director Zhang is also inside?" Nian Liangfu gasped, his face turned white. "I just made a call." "Why did it come so quickly?" Looking around, the acquaintances in the hall who came to play the autumn breeze, eating and drinking for free, were standing everywhere. but only 5 mahjong tables were removed, and 2 tables were not in time to withdraw. Nian Liangfu was so nervous that his fingers were twitching, and he pushed Xuan Dian on his back. "Hurry up and block it, and you will come in later." Xuan Dian was also overwhelmed by her husband's nervousness, and went to taking a staggering step forward. She was about to leave the living room to greet the group of nobles, when a shadow flickered at the hall door, and the guests had arrived. There are several familiar faces in the crowd, including the young and rich director Zhang, the director Chen of the materials department, several deputy directors of the bureau, and the director of the Ministry of Education, who is rarely admired. These people dress up. The young and fashionable beautiful family followed behind. This group of people are all officials with some status, and they are usually imposing figures when they appear on the stage, but now all the limelight is taken up by the young man standing in the middle. At most, he was in his 20s, his facial features seemed to have been carefully sculpted by a master with a knife, deep and distinct, and his eyebrows looked capable and shrewd. The ground slightly raised a slight arc, as if smiling all the time, and let people relax their vigilance unconsciously. Among all the men's suits and leather shoes, only he wore a moon-white filigree camel wool robe, which made him a slender and well-proportioned figure that was a bit taller than the average man. Stop on him. Everyone came in with him, surrounded by stars like the moon, but they seemed to be afraid of offending him and didn't dare to get too close to him. That arrogance and prestige was even more powerful than the presence of the Prime Minister. The living room suddenly fell silent. Nian Liangfu watched the servants clumsily move to the mahjong table at the door, and wished he would faint in the dark, facing the embarrassment of silence. The bright star-like man stood in front of the door and looked around the hall before laughing. It's really presumptuous to visit suddenly. However, the host wouldn't refuse to welcome the guests. Right? Friendly tone. When he opened his mouth, the whole living room seemed to be alive. That's right, Xiaonian, when a distinguished guest comes to the door. Why is the host standing there? Chief Liao, who was standing beside him, immediately laughed and said to Nian Liangfu, "This chief Pai of customs, but I usually think about it. Please don't even invite the distinguished guests. Today, he was willing to move to you, which surprised me." Bai Xuelan turned his head to the side, smiled and talked to him. "Liao Wang made fun of you. When did I turn you down? Treat?" With such a short time, Nian Liangfu retrieved his tongue, wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and hurriedly brought Xuan Dian up to greet him. Negative, neglected, the distinguished guest suddenly came to the door. I was flattered and dumbfounded. Nian Liangfu smiled, apologized to the 2 chiefs, and shook hands with several chiefs to say hello. Xuan Dian also hurriedly said hello to the ladies who came with him. The guests were welcomed into the living room, and the maids came up with drinks. Taking advantage of this free time, the servants quickly continued to move the remaining mahjong tables out. Nian's husband and wife naturally accompany the 2 chiefs to greet each other. "Senior Nian likes to play mahjong?" Bai Xuelan asked. Nian Liangfu's heart almost jumped out of his throat, and he immediately shook his head decisively. "I hate mahjong players the most, they are noisy and indecent. With so many Chinese people, if everyone does serious things, they don't waste their time on mahjong. In terms of boring things, China has long been prosperous and strong." The family background of this Chief Pai should not be underestimated. And he is a great Buddha who must be worshipped. When he took office in the customs office last month, several articles he wrote have been read by Nian Liangfu respectfully. Nian Liangfu slyly quoted a sentence from Mr. Pai's article. Thinking of the occurrence of the mahjong table in his living room, he must give a reasonable explanation, coughed twice, pointed at his wife beside him with a serious face and said, "I'm really ashamed to say it. My wife is also a mahjong player. We have argued several times about this. When I got home today, I saw that there was another mahjong table in the living room, and I was so angry that I couldn't speak. The messenger will throw away the mahjong table for me. In fact, setting up the mahjong table was the idea of Young and Rich. How many officials do not prostitute, gamble or play mahjong these years? Chief Liao and several division chiefs not only love to play mahjong, but also like to gamble. Because they were going to hold a cocktail party, they chose the mahjong table that they liked. Unexpectedly, they hit their heels with a stone. Xuan Huaifeng took the blame, but it was related to her husband's career, and he had a vital interest in himself. Of course, she would not refute. She just chuckled and said, "I know I shouldn't fight, but I was dragged by a few familiar friends. He's the master again, and he can't live without his promise. Liangfu is very good in this aspect. And he never plays mahjong." Bai Xuelan smiled clearly. Didn't Section Chief Nian read the article one wrote? The words made Nian Liangfu very embarrassed, and he waved his hand to explain. No, no, no. Those are all the words on the scene. Just talk. Are you serious? Bai Xuelan seemed to have a smile on his lips, and said lightly, "Mahjong is the quintessence of the country. And I also play it from time to time. Since Mrs. Nian is a mahjong master, why don't you take the time to have a card battle with Mrs. Nian in the future?" He chatted and laughed, and the atmosphere suddenly became lively. No one could have imagined that this new chief with extraordinary origins would be so kind. He was really knowledgeable. And the air of fear suddenly became much more relaxed. It turns out that Chief Pai is also good at this. Let me just say that they are all Chinese, so how can they not play mahjong? National essence, this word is used wonderfully. Chief Liao laughed a few times, and was a shuffle. He glanced at Bai Xuelan. "Mr. Pai, I think it's better to choose a day than to hit the sun. This card battle doesn't need to be postponed. How about we start the battle now?" Gui took back the mahjong table and mahjong that he threw away just now, and placed them in the center of the living room in person. Nianggi asked for instructions again. "Sir, do you want to put the other mahjong tables back?" Before Nian Liangfu could speak, Director Zhang shook his head. No, there are several mahjong tables placed together, and the noise is turned upside down. It disturbed the interest of the chiefs to play cards. Xuan Huaifeng showed an embarrassed expression. "Aren't the chiefs and the ladies bored?" "Where would you be bored?" Several people said. "It's rare to see the chief playing cards. We want to watch the game, just to learn some skills." There was only one mahjong table in such a living room, and the rest of the people looked like they were planning to watch the game. It's just that mahjong is not bridge, and it can only be played by 4 people. There are guests in the room. Chief Pai and Chief Liao will definitely play, but the remaining 2 are hard to pick. Nian Liangfu didn't dare to offend his immediate boss, so he invited Director Zhang to take the seat again and again. He was planning for who else to invite. Director Liao, who was already itchy, beckoned to Xuan Huaifeng. "Mrs. Nian takes the seat. How can this work? Mrs. Nian is the master, and she is also a poker player who is designated by Chief Pai to fight. Mrs. Nian, if you don't go into battle, you will not give Chief Pai face." Bai Xuelan looked at Xuan Huaifeng with a smile. Xuan Huaifeng herself felt a little flattered, but she was also the commander's daughter. She had seen many big scenes. Although she was happy in her heart, her face was still polite and reserved. She glanced into the hall from the corner of her eyes and suddenly found that she could not find any trace of her younger brother. Xuan Huaifeng didn't know when he slipped away when she wasn't paying attention. This reception was a reception that was specially prepared for the young and rich to curry favor. Xuan Dayan specially called Xuan Huaifeng there, hoping to find a way out for Xuan Huaifeng. Now is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to introduce Xuan Huaifeng to these heavyweights. Xuan Dayan can't let it go no matter what. Said that, I had something important to tell him, and asked him to come over quickly. After speaking, he smiled and nodded at the two chiefs and one division chief before finally taking a seat. Xuan Huaifeng quietly went out when the living room was in chaos. He originally planned to meet Zhang Mama and go back to the clubhouse. He was talking to Zhang Mama when the maid came, and when he saw him, he hurriedly said, Master Huaifeng, Madam. I ask you to come over and tell me that there is something important. What is it? It's something important. Xuan Huaifeng didn't know what was going on. When I arrived at the door of the living room, I stood on the steps and saw that I was playing mahjong again. I turned around silently and wanted to leave. But Xuan Dayan was sitting at the mahjong table, but her heart was not on mahjong. She was anxiously waiting for Xuan Huaifeng to come over and kept looking up. Although the people watching the battle at the table surrounded the inner 3 floors and the outer 3 floors, Xuan Huaifeng was tall and on the steps, she was able to see it at a glance. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng turn around and knowing that the younger brother was disobedient, Xuan Dayan shouted, Huaifeng! Stop! She suddenly raised her voice and turned everyone's attention to Xuan Huaifeng. The face of the young and rich suddenly darkened, and he was worried about the presence of the guests. So he refrained from snorting. Xuan Huaifeng was stopped by her, so he could only turn back, walked to the table, and asked in a low voice, Sister. What are you looking for me? In front of so many people, Xuan Dayan felt embarrassed, she couldn't. It was said that Huaifeng would come over to meet the two chiefs and seek a position. Thanks to her quick response, she gave a smile to everyone at the table, and pretended to mention, This is my younger brother Huaifeng, who is young and came back from studying in the UK. She glanced at Huaifeng and said, I'm looking for you, of course I have something to do, didn't you see me playing cards? I've been bullied twice, come and help me. Xuan Huaifeng smiled bitterly. I don't know how. Playing mahjong. No, it doesn't matter. It happened to be Xuan Dayan's turn to draw the cards. She had a mahjong in her hand. But she didn't turn it over immediately and handed it to Xuan Huaifeng's mouth. By your blessing, help me play the game just one blow. Under the watchful eyes. It was Xuan Huaifeng's turn to be embarrassed, and he couldn't help laughing and said, Do you believe in this old-fashioned trick? You are not allowed to call me a sister if you don't blow it. Xuan Huaifeng had no choice but to lower his head and blow on the back of the card. Unexpectedly, Xuan Dayan turned over the cards, and when she saw it, she laughed and said to the 3, Sorry, it's really stupid. She pushed the cards lightly. She actually got a clear result. And she also carried 2 club cards. The money they played in mahjong was unusually large, 10 yuan a chip. According to the current number, each person would give Xuan Dayan 120 yuan. The 3 losers didn't take this little money to heart, counted the money with a smile, handed it to Xuan Dayan, and shuffled the cards again. While shuffling the cards, Mr. Liao chatted. Mrs. Nian, your brother is a talent. You've won the prize. In fact, young people are not good looking. It's good to be able to do things. High school? I'm having a headache because of this. He studies mathematics, and he's not very popular now. Drawing cards with one hand, she smiled and said to Chief Liao, When my younger brother was studying in the UK. The professors said he was diligent and obedient. It's a pity that when he returned to China, he didn't have the chance to be appreciated by others. And there were not many people who were willing to use him. That's great, I just wanted to borrow it, so I was embarrassed to speak. Bai Xuelan, who was sitting across from her, suddenly interrupted her. Everyone looked at him in confusion. Bai Xuelan pointed to a column of cards standing in front of him. Mrs. Nian, my hand is very bad. And I will give you a blow for your brother's blessing, and let me touch a big beard? What if I win money? I'll be the host. Then everyone understood what he meant, burst into laughter, and tried to please. Yes, yes, Mrs. Nian can't use all the blessings. Otherwise, it's too unfair, it should be given to Chief Pai can borrow it. What about Chief Liao and Director Zhang? It's better to treat them equally. Mr. Liao is also a funny person who knows how to talk and laugh. He waved his hand and said proudly, let the fortune go to Mr. Pai. Anyway, if he wins the money, he wants to invite the host. We can just eat the book back. Director Zhang said, I eat a lot, so I raised my hands to support the words of Chief Liao. Everyone laughed again, very happy. Bai Xuelan ignored how the people around they laughed. The corners of his mouth raised slightly, his eyes lifted slightly, and fell directly on Xuan Huaifeng's face. Although he looked up slantingly upwards, his eyes were like looking down, with a kind of oppressive force hidden in the relaxed and idle. It was his turn to draw the card. He took the card into his hand, but refused to turn it over. He still stared at Xuan Huaifeng, who was standing behind Xuan Daiyan. A no-flop gesture. After such a delay, the entire mahjong game stopped, and the players and the viewers were all waiting helplessly. The atmosphere changed, and silence fell. Nian Liangfu would never let this poker game about the future go wrong. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng standing upright and motionless like a wooden pole, he wanted to kick this ignorant brother-in-law, and hurried over to pat him on the shoulder, squeezing and laughing. Said, come on, give Chief Pai a breath. He pushed hard. Xuan Huaifeng staggered slightly after being pushed by him, then stood up straight again, raised his eyes, and glanced around slowly. His appearance was inherited from his beautiful mother who passed away early. His eyes were big and bright, and he was very energetic. When his black and white pupils moved, the brilliance flowed, and those who were swept by his gaze couldn't help but suddenly flashed. And he focused on seeing those pair of eyes again. When his eyes were met, Xuan Huaifeng had already turned around and walked straight to the hall door. Everyone was stunned, looking at his tall and stubborn back. Nian Liangfu screamed badly in his heart, but Xuan Daiyan was a little worried that her younger brother had been spoiled by her father, and she couldn't bear this kind of anger. Huaifeng. To everyone's surprise, the first to call out was the very hot Chief Pai. Bai Xuelan called towards Xuan Huaifeng's back, and seeing that he not only did not stop, but also showed signs of speeding up his pace, he simply stood up and chased after him. I haven't seen each other in a few years, it's just a joke, why bother?